Why isn't Manipur the headline every single day? How has Manipur fallen off the headline when it's been now more than a year and a half since violence and ethnic strife effectively divided the state into two parts? Will peace ever come or will it remain elusive? I'm Barkha Dutt, you're with the Mojo Story. On the program today, we'll be joined in a moment from now by a very special guest. Justice Siddharth Mridul has been the Chief Justice of the Manipur High Court. Remember, the Manipur High Court first came into focus, and this was before Justice Mridul's time, when an order of the High Court, subsequently revoked, asked the state to consider whether scheduled tribe status should also be provided to the Meitei community. What followed thereafter, though there are two views on whether this was a catalyst or the cause, was a kind of eruption of violence between the Kuki and the Meitei communities, leading to an unprecedented situation that even dragged in security agencies into the environment of polarization. Our reporting on the ground, spending nights with what once used to be farmers and students, showed that the most dangerous aspect of what is happening in Manipur is the fact that there are thousands of arms in the hands of civilians. While some attempts have been made to bring peace and there have been lulls in between the storms, there is no sign of any sort of abiding resolution. At one point, it looked as if the state might come under president's rule, but that hasn't happened either. Though, if there's one thing that Kukis and Meiteis agree on, it is their disappointment with how the state government has responded. Joining us on the program today is our newsmaker. As I said, we have a very special guest, someone who has had quite literally a ringside view of everything that has gone on. Justice Siddharth Mridul is with us. Justice Mridul recently retired as the Chief Justice of the Manipur High Court. Welcome, and we thank you for what we think is an extremely important conversation about a state that needs to be spoken about much more. But unfortunately, large sections of our media are paying no attention to Manipur. I want to start by asking you, just before you left office, if you had to be asked to describe the situation in the state, how would you describe it?
Well, good evening and thank you for listening to me. The last couple of weeks in Imphal were full of alarm and strife. There was arson and houses were set ablaze. The MLA's houses were targeted by various groups. There was an indefinite strike by various organizations, Meitei organizations. And this was all as a consequence of the unfortunate events that occurred in Jiribam just shortly before that. So the last couple of weeks were my worst nightmare, because after I went to Imphal in October last year, there were periods of calm, although there were periods where there was absence of violence. And for a while, I was led to believe that Manipur was back on track and that peace was back on track in Manipur. But as it turned out, just flattered to deceive.
So you felt that things might get better, but the exact opposite happened?
Yes, it did. We put in a lot of hard work, and I made it a point to visit all the districts, all the judicial districts, and a large number of relief camps inhabited by both the Kukis as well as the Meiteis who had been displaced as a result of this ethnic strife. And I was very hopeful that the people, particularly the 60,000 in these relief camps, were very keen to go back to life the way it was prior to the events of the 3rd of May 2023, and that they would push the rest of the populace into towards peace, lasting peace and normalcy.
But that didn't happen.
It's truly unfortunate that it hasn't happened. And in fact, the last couple of weeks, like I said before, were cause for alarm, and I was disappointed and disillusioned that despite all the boots on the ground,
Mhm.
he has not been restored in Manipur, and that the ethnic strife, if anything, seems to have, at least in those 2 weeks, gained momentum.
Can I start by addressing the elephant in the room? This, of course, happened before you took over as Chief Justice of Manipur High Court, but there is a lot of analysis that suggests that it was a court order from the Manipur High Court that asked the state to consider scheduled tribe status for the Meitei community that was, in a sense, the matchstick for this fire. Do you do you do you agree with that? I know that that order was um, subsequently revoked, but when you look back at that initial order, what do you make of it?
I've said this before that it's most unfair to characterize the order passed by the Manipur High Court, as being responsible for all the violence in Manipur. It is not.
Hmm.
Far from it. It is most unfair for anybody to even suggest it. What it did, and I think you put it best, it acted as a catalyst. Uh,
Hmm.
Manipur has been a powder keg for long years prior to that order issued by the High Court. The order
Yeah.
was simply asking the state government to respond to an earlier communication from the central government and seeking a socio-economic report on whether Meiteis could be considered uh, uh, for the list of scheduled tribes. Nothing more, nothing less. It was not a direction, as was made out, that the High Court directed that Meiteis be included in the category of scheduled tribe. There was no such direction. It
Hmm.
was the central government was asked to, the state government was asked to respond to
Was
the
asked to
central government.
consider it. Was asked to consider
Exactly,
it. Hmm.
absolutely, and this is provided for by the Constitution, and it's the Constitution, when it comes to the categorization of scheduled tribes, is a self-contained code. The courts have no jurisdiction whatsoever to direct the inclusion of anybody or any class of people or category of people into that list of scheduled tribes. The courts do not have the jurisdiction. So
You say that it,
I mean,
yeah.
if I would put it differently, I think it was an innocuous order. It was a mandamus asking the state government, which had not responded to the center for a long period of time, almost 10 odd years, to respond to the center. That was about it.
Hmm.
That was about it. And
But
nobody could have
but
anticipated the kind of reaction that it evoked. Nobody
But
could
it
have
was serious.
anticipated.
It was serious enough that in 2023, the court then deletes a particular paragraph that asked the state government to consider scheduled tribe status for the Meitei people.
So you must understand that modification, that review happened at the instance of the Meitei organizations themselves. Nobody
Hmm.
wants violence. The common refrain that I heard in all the relief camps from all the people that I interacted with is that we would like to go home. We want peace and normalcy to be restored. Just a
Hmm.
handful of people, for their own reasons, right, have used this as an opportunity to give rise to a conflagration in Manipur, which has taken so many lives, 258, if I'm not mistaken,
Yeah. Yeah.
to date.
Y- Yeah. When you were still serving as Chief Justice of the High Court, in an interview to the Hindustan Times, you described what you were seeing as unprecedented, but you also expressed displeasure with the state for what you called selective compliance. Right? That's what you said to the Hindustan Times. Um, how do you see the role of the state government?
Well, the point is that we have both the state government and the central government with boots on the ground in Manipur today. There
Mhm.
are almost 30,000 paramilitary forces on the ground in Manipur. In addition, apart from the army, the ITBP, and the Manipur police, the fact is that if peace and normalcy has not been restored, and if there are still incidents of extreme violence and deaths, assassinations almost, then the executive is to that extent accountable. They
Yeah,
are
sure.
accountable, right? So the fact
Of
we've
course.
been, well, while I was there, even towards the end of my tenure, on the penultimate day, we directed the government to make sure that the lives and the property of all the citizens of Manipur was secured. That is the mandate of the constitution and the law. Law and order is within the exclusive domain of the executive, and they must take all necessary steps. And particularly since the presence of the forces is very much there on the ground.
Hmm. What did you mean by selective compliance by the state government?
Selective compliance was in relation to the judiciary. It was in relation to the judicial infrastructure, the appointment of judicial officers to man the vacant posts. It was in that context. It was not in the context of the law and order situation in Manipur. In relation to the law and order situation, we have all along directed the government to make sure that there are no further incidents of violence and that the citizenry can go about their lives without fearing abduction, extortion, or much worse, death, killing.
One of the, in my opinion, the most alarming dimensions to this conflict is how the security personnel have been sucked into a kind of ethnic division. And what I mean is, you see people of the Meitei community targeting the Assam Rifles, and you see conversely the Kuki community targeting the Manipur police. I'm making a broad stroke comment here, but we've seen this on the ground. And we've seen women, Mirapaibis, confronting soldiers, but we've also seen Kuki women not allowing the Manipur police to come into areas. We've also seen police armories looted and weapons in the hands of boys who should be in school and farmers who should be concentrating on their rice fields. As Chief Justice of the Manipur High Court, do you feel the courts should have done more to enforce a disarming of the civilian population? Because how can there be peace when thousands of people have stolen weapons in their hands?
I've said this repeatedly, and we've always spoken about, first of all, recovering all the weapons that have been looted.
Hmm.
We've also spoken about preventing arms from being smuggled into the country. Right. This is in the omnibus directions given to the government have been to restore law and order, restore peace
Hmm.
and calm within the
Hmm.
state. And this includes all of the above. It also includes free movement on the highways without being extorted.
Yes, but none of this, with respect, Justice, is actually happening. The state remains effectively partitioned, effectively, de facto. If you're from the Meitei community, you can't cross, certain boundary districts outside of Imphal. If you're from the Kuki community, you don't even come back to Imphal to collect a dead body. That is the truth. And there is an effective partition. So when you say it's an omnibus order, I guess that's what I'm trying to push back on. That, do you think there should have been more micro sort of interventions from the court, or do you think that was not the job of the court?
No, the job of the court is to remind the government to fulfill its obligation under the law to maintain law and order. The courts cannot overstep their jurisdiction and assume the role of the executive.
Hmm.
So we went to the extent possible of reminding them of their obligation to ensure law and order, the upkeep of law and order, to ensure the safety of citizens and to ensure that anybody who took the law into their own hands was dealt with quickly and firmly. It is
You
not for the
said that,
courts to run the government. The courts cannot run the
fair,
government. Yeah.
fair. But when you look back at your tenure, is there something you wish, given everything that's happened, given that you were hopeful and then your hope was, as it said, a flattery, to deceive? Those hopes didn't yield the results that you'd hoped for. Do you believe that there's something more you could have done that you regret today?
Well, what I regret is not on the judicial uh, front, it's on a personal front. The
Hmm.
efforts that we made when we visited all these camps was to create an environment congenial, to bring
Hmm.
people back together, to mend hearts, so to speak. And for a while, I believe that our constant visits to all the relief camps and our interaction with all the IDPs did push the agenda in that direction. Unfortunately, like I said before, it did not. I mean, we took a step forward, and then we seem to have taken a couple of steps back.
Now that you're not, not the serving Chief Justice of the Manipur High Court and can speak more freely, are you surprised that President's rule has not been imposed in the state?
Well, let me put it differently. A lot of people are surprised that President's rule has not been imposed for three reasons. The
Mhm.
first amongst them is that there is no disarmament, there is no recovery of all the weapons that have been smuggled or snatched. There is no recovery. Secondly, uh, the warring, and for want of a better expression, the warring Meiteis and the Kukis have not been brought together to discuss terms of rapprochement, right?
Mhm.
And lastly, the boots on the ground have not been employed, have not been utilized most effectively to make sure that nobody is permitted to take the law into their own hands. That hasn't happened. And why I've always said this, even when I was in office, I've said this.
But when you say a lot of people are surprised that President's rule has not been imposed, what is your own personal opinion? Should President's rule be imposed?
Well, if the violence continues at the I mean, in the manner that it has, and if it takes as many more lives, I do not believe that the president, because it is for the president to determine. I do not believe that the president would be left with a choice but to consider president's rule to restore normalcy and restore calm
Why do you think
and
it hasn't
uphold
happened yet?
the rule of law in Manipur.
Why do you think it hasn't happened yet?
Well, I believe the reason that it hasn't happened is that the political process today itself, the elected executive is not on the same page, as is evident from all the reports that emanate from Manipur. That there is a rift even amongst the ruling party in
Hmm.
Manipur.
Hmm.
There is a rift. There are MLAs from within the ruling party who are calling for the chief minister's resignation.
But that is because the line of division is bases your identity, your ethnic identity. It is not bases. There are very few people who are actually speaking from a position of consensus creation. If you're a Kuki BJP MLA, then your view is different, right?
I don't think so. I think there was a time, if I'm not much mistaken, that almost 20 amongst the ruling party MLAs wanted a change at the helm.
Hmm.
And it had nothing to do with their ethnic identity. It was across their ethnic identities. There were a large number
Hmm.
of MLAs from amongst the ruling party who were willing to tender their resignations, if I'm not much mistaken.
Hmm. So, when you look at this rift within the ruling party and yet the lack of any concrete decision vis-a-vis Manipur, what does that tell you?
No, the point is that the amongst the decisions that could have been taken earlier was to make sure that there were more boots on the ground and that law and order was restored at all costs, which
Hmm.
is being done now only after the arson and violence in the aftermath of the unfortunate incidents in Jeribam.
You said that you are disappointed and disillusioned. If I can ask you what disappoints and disillusions you the most, what would you say?
What disappoints me is that normalcy and bring back peace. And what disillusions me is the fact that the ethnic rift has not been addressed in a manner so as to has not been addressed effectively so as to put an end to all this strife and the hate mongering that is currently going on a regular basis in
Hmm.
Manipur.
Explain that.
You must understand, all that you need to do is to look at the social media or even the local publications to know that the divisions between the communities are so sharp, that there is such a deep divide between the communities, that it's almost as if they are at war with each other. The 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 thirst for the thirst for bloodletting seems to be
Mhm.
getting better of most of us.
Yeah, and in fact, I will tell you as a journalist reporting Manipur, we get equal amount of hatred and vitriol from our audience depending on what perspective we're sharing. So if we're sharing a perspective of a Kuki community, the Meiteis will be angry and they'll say you're a Kuki channel. If we share the perspective of and conversely, my point is, who do you blame for this breakdown of communication between two communities?
I blame all of us. I'll tell you why. And this is not a philosophical comment. I blame all of us simply because we have not given enough attention to Manipur.
Yeah.
We have possibly pursued policies that were exclusionist, right? And we have not bothered to pay attention to what their difficulties are. Had they been addressed in time, I do not believe that things would have come to such a. I mean, there wouldn't have been despair today had these been addressed in time. Manipur is a small state, but it's the gateway to India. It has always been the gateway to India, and it's a state which is geopolitically important for the country. And eventually, all Manipuris, like the
Mhm.
rest of us, are Indian citizens. So we needed to pay more attention to the cries for help that emanated from Manipur and from each and every one of them.
Is this a failure of politics?
Of course, inter alia, it is a favor of politics. It is a
No,
favor of.
failure of
I'm
failure,
sorry. It
failure
is
of
a
politics.
failure of. It is a failure of politics. Yes, of course. I agree with that completely.
So what now? I mean, the new chief justice has been appointed for Manipur. What next?
Well, I must tell you that the one positive news that has emanated from Manipur in the last couple of days is that schools have been reopened after a hiatus of 13 days. Right. But what is unfortunate is that one Meitei individual who worked in an army garrison in Kangpokpi is missing without a trace for the last couple of days. And it shouldn't happen. We are not being able to locate individuals who have gone missing
Yes,
in both the hills as well as the valley. So
yes.
the Chief Justice of the Manipur High Court has his work cut out for him, and he's issued directions in this behalf. The judiciary
Let
is
me
continuing to function. The judiciary, as far as the judiciary is concerned, we have been on the mend ever since May of 2023. What the judiciary has been able to accomplish in Manipur in the past 13 months, if you look at it in isolation with all the other things that have been going on in Manipur, we've done we should we've done a good job. We have made sure that everybody has access to the courts. We have made sure that wherever you are, you can appear through video conferencing. So, physical barriers, violence notwithstanding, you will get a hearing in court wherever you are. And all judicial officers have been accessible through video
Yeah,
conferencing. We
yeah.
permitted e-filing. So, if people are unable to physically visit the courts, they can file
Hmm.
electronically, and we respond immediately.
Let me ask you in the end, if you had to give one prescription for the state of Manipur to either the government or the next Chief Justice, what would it be?
Well, all that I would say is disarm the people, all those who have illegal arms, whether snatched or smuggled, disarm them. That's the first step.
Yeah,
The second step is to make sure that there are no further incidents of violence and arson and kidnap and extortion in Manipur.
yeah.
And both of this should lead up to the communities coming to the negotiating table and working this out. We cannot have the administration working as a buffer between two communities, which is the reality on the ground today. This is my wish list.
Well, I can only hope that finally your wishes do come true, even if they didn't when you were serving as Chief Justice. Thank you for your plain speak and your passion, Justice Siddharth Mridul. Thank you so much for talking to us.
Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you so much.